Yes, the honourable member for St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I am obliged for this opportunity to share a few thoughts on the financial statement and budgetary presentation that was made on Tuesday. Mr. Speaker, sir, as the last person on the Barbados Labour Party side to speak, I think it would be remiss of me not to begin by congratulating all of the members on this side for the very excellent nature of their contribution. I noted the concern articulated by the learned Attorney General when he spoke today, sir, with respect to the fact that in some instances there has been a repetition of concerns expressed by Barbados Labour Party spokespersons with respect to the financial situation in Barbados. And to be fair to the learned Attorney General, he spoke well. He targeted the leader of the opposition when he made his remarks about repetition. I think, sir, that having listened to the Right Honourable Member for St. Peter, he will better understand the concern. The ills, Mr. Speaker, sir, the pathology, the sclerosis, if you will, that has set in, sir, has not gotten better. The extent of the deficit, the debt profile of the country, the problem of the hemorrhaging of foreign exchange, all of these things, Mr. Speaker, continue on a trajectory that remains unbroken and uncorrected. And it is for that reason and that reason alone that spokespersons on this side continue to drive home the concern that we have with respect to the direction that the country is going in. Now, Mr. Speaker, it would be churlish of me not to acknowledge that there is some good in this budget. And I want to start on that note, sir, because part of that about which I wish to address this House is the way forward, precisely that to which the Right Honourable Member for St. Peter just addressed. And I take the view, Mr. Speaker, that one of the things that we have to do is to recognize that in straitened circumstances, with reduced policy and fiscal space, we as a people, sir, need to master those things that we have control over. There are some things within our domain, and those things that are within our domain, in my respectful view, Mr. Speaker, sir, must be done and executed to the very best of our ability as we fight in these difficult waters. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I said, it would be churlish not to acknowledge, for example, that the initiative to utilize special development area legislation to improve the Greater Bridgetown is an excellent one. There's no Barbadian who can feel proud of the capital city when it drops to sleep after 4:30 every evening. When we travel and we see what capital cities around the world can be, we recognize the extent of the potential that we're failing to grapple and grasp. So I have no difficulty at all with that initiative. I am equally attracted, Mr. Speaker, sir, to the idea of utilizing duty-free zones. And quite frankly, I would like to hear some more about it. And I think that this is something that must be fleshed out and carefully thought through. As a person who has the privilege of being in this House and is charged with the responsibility for shadowing matters relating to commerce, however, I make this caveat. Philosophically, Mr. Speaker, sir, if we are going to go the road of utilizing duty-free zones, let me say that for my part, I believe that it is an opportunity for us to engage in much-needed democratization of the Barbados economy. The duty-free cartel in Barbados has remained the same from time immemorial, as far back as the memory of man doth run. And Mr. Speaker, sir, there's an opportunity to break that stranglehold and to make it more reflective of the wider, broader base of social economic profile of this country, sir, which I think we should be looking to do. Because there's no magic in selling a premium wine or jewelry or alcohol or whatever. This is something that can be done by anyone. And I believe the opportunity is before us, sir, if we're going to go this way, to treat the democratization of that particular subsector as a low-hanging fruit. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, more substantively, I say at the very outset that I take the view that we in this House should be humble enough to recognize that we are privileged to stand here on the shoulders of titans. There are some who gave all, sacrificed their very lives in order to make this island the best developing country on God's earth. Those people, sir, were not capable of stooping so low as to come to this place to toy and play games with the legitimate ambitions and aspirations of the citizens that we have the privilege of representing. And on Tuesday night, I winced during the presentation of the Minister of Finance and wondered to myself if he ever became acquainted with the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northwest, who stood in this House, Mr. Speaker, on the 13th day of December 2013 and gave a ministerial statement, a copy of which I have in my hand, and said at page 12 the following words: Cabinet has agreed to institute a strict program of attrition across the Central Public Service, filling posts only where it is absolutely unavoidable over the next 5 years, ending 2019. This essential program of attrition is expected to reduce central government employment levels from approximately 16,970 to 14,612 jobs, a projected loss of 2,358 posts. That was said as an article of faith, a statement of policy intent by this government in December of 2013. And any person who is familiar with the ordinary usage and understanding of the English language would come to an understanding that this program of attrition, to run 5 years to 2019, being essential, was a program within which we are still in the middle. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, on Tuesday evening, I heard a policy pronouncement which would have us accept that all of the temporary workers in the civil service are going to be appointed. Now, Mr. Speaker, there is a mutual exclusivity in the two things, because you cannot have a program of attrition in which you are getting rid of 2,000 posts and at the same time have a program in which you are going to be establishing posts. And for those who do not appreciate the point, Mr. Speaker, sir, the Honourable Member himself spoke to this in his own presentation when he said that his appreciation of the difficulty with confronting temporary officers was that there were no vacant and established posts within which to appoint them. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that there cannot be a trifling with people's legitimate aspirations on this matter. Because it is true that all of the temporary workers in Barbados legitimately want to be able to go to confront a bank, and the members on that side have heard me speak to this matter as recently as the last time I spoke in this House. So I am on board there. But I want to know for certain that we can make this happen. And I find the sleight of hand very interesting, where you can't get a date by which the appointment is to take place. You seek shelter behind the face of a committee that remains unnamed and unformed, but it is good political posture. Mr. Speaker, sir, you know, There was a gentleman who never became president of the United States of America, though he tried more than once. And he was a governor of Illinois. And he said something, sir, that's very important at this juncture. He said, sir, that inconsistency on the part of a politician may be an abomination unto the Lord, but for the politician, it is a very present help in time of trouble. This government is in deep, deep trouble. It has lost faith with core constituencies. And what we know for a fact is that it is 18 months at most away from a general election, a date with destiny. And we are now embarking, sir, on a road that is like the abomination unto the Lord. The pathway is easy. Inconsistency, confuse people, induce them to believe that that which they want can be. And it may never come to pass. And that is the danger, Mr. Speaker. It is something that we cannot afford to toy with. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to also speak to the question of the platform that we have to lay for the way forward. Because in my view, Mr. Speaker, one of the first things we have to do, as I said at the outset, is to master those things that were within our immediate grasp and control. I do not share the view expressed by the Prime Minister when he spoke to the Chamber of Commerce and Industry at the start of this year, I believe it was, on the matter of business facilitation, when he indicated that it was his view that this is a journey and not a destination. Let me be very clear. If you do not set down any roadmaps or checkpoints along the way to establish where you are, then, Mr. Speaker, sir, anything that you do, any travel, will become a rambling, a journey without an end. You have to have clear sets of roadmaps and checkpoints along the way if any effort is going to be worth your while and you will come to, or you're expecting to come to any realistic final point. So it is with business facilitation in Barbados, Mr. Speaker. And the danger that we are facing in this country is that at the highest level of government, there is an inclination to treat this as though you can just flick it off the pads. It is a light-hearted approach taken by the government. There are people out there who are treating this land of our birth as though we are a collection of underlings. The Ease of Doing Business Report 2016, Mr. Speaker, tells the world that Barbados is the most difficult place to do business in the Eastern Caribbean. That means something. It tells the world, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we are to be ranked alongside of the West Bank and Gaza Strip, a war-torn, conflict-ridden jurisdiction. That means something. And Mr. Speaker, sir, while I have a difficulty with being treated that way, what means even more to me is that the day-to-day frustration of the people I represent is seen when they go about their legitimate daily business. Beyond the investor coming to Barbados, or that we will want to come to Barbados, beyond the businessman, Mr. Speaker, the ordinary Barbadian born and bred, the man who brings in a car park at the airport and is told that he must go down to Warren's with the paperwork because the paperwork is to be processed down there. And it takes 4 or 5 hours waiting down in Warren's to be told, come back the next day, sir. And when he gets back the next day to get back the paperwork, he's told, go back up to the airport to collect your product. That waste of time, 2 days, has a cost. The Attorney General knows, or should know, that a man leaving St. Philip on his way to work in Bridgetown, who is reported for speeding, will have a case heard and can only, under this system, have a case heard now in Horse Hill, St. Joseph. And he's going up to Horse Hill to find people from all around Barbados who have similar traffic matters converging in Horse Hill, St. Joseph. And he will spend a whole day in Horse Hill, St. Joseph, sir, and that has a cost associated with it. And I'm not into the blaming of any particular member now. I am dealing, sir, with a failing in our system, because collectively, and this is one person, he may be able to deal with it, another person may not. But collectively, it has a real cost. And Mr. Speaker, the solution is what we have to target. Now, I want to say to this government, we are not alone in trying to move an economy into a more sophisticated, modern setting. The reality that we face, Mr. Speaker, is that we have to look at how some of the other people who found themselves originating in a similar economic profile that we did and who traveled the same journey, what have they done? Now, I find it interesting that Jamaica, which, as you just heard the Right Honourable Member for St. Peter say, went over the edge and has had to experience the struggle of pulling themselves back up now, was able to sit down, and this is the precedent that they have set. The head of government, the Prime Minister, as she then was, convened a meeting or a set of meetings with all the heads of department and their deputies, all the chiefs and the deputy chiefs, because every government department in some way plays an interactive role with the private sector. And part and parcel of the whole interaction and purpose of the meeting was to identify 3 or 4 initiatives that you can do in every government department that makes that government department more responsive to the concerns and the needs of the business community in the country. And you set a time frame within which those 3 or 4 things that you've identified as immediately achievable fruit can be implemented. And you hold people accountable for the process, Mr. Speaker. It is not a difficult thing. But I do not share the view either that this forum is not the forum for us to be articulating this type of approach as the way forward. Because, Mr. Speaker, the truth is that what happened in this budget is that we treated the issue, the burning question of business facilitation in Barbados, as though it doesn't exist. The learned Attorney General of the land knows that this is a humbug. The Minister of Commerce knows that this is a humbug. The Right Honourable Prime Minister knows that this is a humbug. And, Mr. Speaker, sir, the budget itself cannot be empty of any form of intervention that will reflect government's shift or government's urgency in trying to treat to this matter. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, that is but one suggestion of a plausible way forward. I have a concern as well about the international business sector, sir. Another sector which is critically important, but about which this budget remains absolutely silent. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, let me be very clear about why it is critically important. For me, it is not critically important that I look after the interests or articulate the concerns of a multimillionaire who is investing in Barbados. What is of critical importance to me is that my constituents, sir, can have buses running from an Arch Hall to get them to Bridgetown. And the only way that they can get that done is if we can get the international business tax receipts, the corporation tax receipts, back up to the $300 million level that it used to be when the Barbados Labour Party was in government. We need to have, Mr. Speaker, sir, garbage trucks collecting the garbage from my constituents so they don't have to wait 3 weeks for a collection, sir. And the only way we can get that done is if we can get the corporation tax receipts. So there is a nexus, a linkage to be drawn between the efficiency of the international business sector, which is a rainmaker, a financial rainmaker. It could flood the land with money if we manage it well. And this is where we are not, this is what we are not doing, sir. It is a source of concern that along with 91 or 92 other countries, we entered into an agreement voluntarily. And we said with them that we are going to collaborate to form a common reporting regime on matters relating to the bank accounts held by individuals in this country who've come from over and away to do business here. We entered into an agreement with them that if there are charities or companies here, we're going to let them know who the beneficiaries are of the companies or the charities' accounts. Because that is the only way the world can effectively work towards resolving concerns about money laundering, which is the illegal movement of money, or trafficking, or terrorism, Mr. Speaker, sir, all of which is caught up in this movement of illicit movement of money and finance. And Mr. Speaker, sir, that this government agreed that by 2015, end of 2015, we would have a legislative framework in place, and that we would be in a position to report to those with whom we agreed voluntarily by 2017. The concern is, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we are now in the middle of 2016, approaching the end, and we don't have the legislative framework yet. So there's no lawful authority to exchange information with anybody. And there's no draft legislation circulated either. So we are behind the game once again. I can't blame Greece because Barbados hasn't got the legislation. I can't stand up here and look into the eyes of the people of the land through the lens of the camera and say, well, it is not Barbados' fault if there's a recession in Europe. Because this is a matter about which we and only we have control. And I say to the Prime Minister, sir, as head of government, the fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars. It is in ourselves that they treat us as underlings. It offends me as a Barbadian, sir, when the OECD, people from out there that ain't know nothing but here, will sit in their pristine towers and pass judgment and give this country a bad name. When, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are in a position to avoid it happening by doing the heavy lifting that is required. And when the international business community feels that their interests are being compromised because Barbados' legislative environment is not what it should be, then they pack up, pull up stumps, and exercise the option to vote with their feet. They go elsewhere. We born here, we can't go nowhere else. They go elsewhere to seek a better life, Mr. Speaker, and leave in their wake a set of frustrated Barbadians who need the tax receipts from them. Mr. Speaker, sir, I turn my attention next to the concern I raised in the last budget, which was on a matter relating to...
Yes,
I want to start the honourable straight, but he's misleading the House a bit. The matter of the common reporting standard that Barbados is signed on to as an early adopter for 2016 is a matter that the government has not fallen asleep at. Certainly, it is not entirely dissimilar to that of FATCA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act of the U.S. that we signed on to. And the truth of the matter is that nearly all entities, all financial institutions that are engaged in FATCA ought to have the necessary structures in place to ensure that they do comply with the common reporting standard and therefore are in position to do such. The Barbados Revenue Authority, that is deemed the competent authority as part of the Ministry of Finance, has also invested in technology and systems to make that happen and is principally ready. As recent as Tuesday morning, 10 o'clock, the Barbados International Business Association, the Barbados Revenue Authority, and the Ministry of International Business met on this matter, and we agreed on the way forward. The regulations have been prepared and are with the Ministry of Finance for forwarding on to Cabinet, and any legislative adjustments to be made through the Chief Parliamentary Counsel's office. So I wish to give the honourable members of St. James Central as with the entire international business and financial services community, that the government of Barbados, through the Revenue Authority, is very much ahead of the game on this matter.
Thanks for the elucidation. Honourable member, please continue.
And if the
No, you got
you got to speak for
Honourable member, please continue.
May I continue, sir?
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I am obliged for the intervention of the minister, sir, but
if the honourable member would give me on a point of will yield as my friend in my capacity as minister responsible.
Pardon? It's a point of elucidation. You ask him to give
Yes,
it.
indeed.
Go ahead. Go on.
As the honourable member knows, we presently going through a preparation for a mutual evaluation and stuff. And as part of that, we're actually looking to see where our gaps are. And this is indeed one of our gaps. And I can make the commitment that I've already identified who in the Chief Parliamentary Counsel's office will be doing the drafting because we need to have a legislative framework in place before the end of the year. And I don't often give my commitment on issues of drafting, but this is so important for our financial services industry and for us as a country that I will give you my commitment that in fact it will be done before the end of the year.
Honourable member, your time would have expired in 5 minutes time break. You have 7 minutes in which to conclude.
I am obliged, Mr. Speaker, sir. And let me say, Mr. Speaker, sir, that perhaps this is one of the better moments of the Parliament. I make these observations, Mr. Speaker, sir, because I am aware, and indeed I've discussed it with the leader of the opposition. You know, the Cayman Islands had passed their legislation since last year. So we understand on this side, sir, the urgency. And we don't make this just as a cheap, this concern articulated as a cheap political point. It is a genuine source of concern. Now, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to get back to the other issue, which I think helps us to form a vision of the Barbados we will have for tomorrow. I want to think, sir, that members on both sides should be able to agree that the economy of tomorrow, sir, will be characterized by fairness. It will be characterized by a balance which allows competitors to have a level playing field. I believe, Mr. Speaker, sir, that there's nothing wrong with that, and that is an objective we should be striving to. The energy sector, Mr. Speaker, the energy sector is a sector which is of strategic national importance. And again, with respect to the national BNTCL, National Terminal Company Limited, this budget could have been used by the Minister of Finance to give the country an insight into the privatization process that is in fact taking place under the Democratic Labour Party. Now, I don't want them to flinch because that is not a bad thing. As I understand it, Mr. Speaker, sir, the sale of the BNTCL will go through, and there should be about $85 million received from it. Now, Mr. Speaker, again, let me start by saying that I think it is a wonderful thing that a born and bred Barbadian will be the owner. I think it is a wonderful thing. But because that's my information. If I am wrong, you can get up on a point of order again. The point that I want to drive to, Mr. Speaker, sir, though, is that we are having this discussion, first of all, in the context of a budget in which a draconian tax was imposed to raise $143 million in a year. And if it continues, I presume it will be that and more per year. Now, Mr. Speaker, that has an inflationary element associated with it. The cost of living in Barbados will likely spiral upwards. You take the National Terminal Company, which has strategic importance in distributing energy product in Barbados, and in which government historically had capped profits at 0.5%, so that we shielded the consumer out there buying gasoline or diesel or fuel oil or whatever. We shielded them from the full market value of what the throughput would have been because government owned it. I wanted to hear the Minister of Finance give this country some assurances as to what the sale agreement would be and what it would contain, and whether the consumer in Barbados can expect to be in any way shielded, because the concern that I must have is that my best information, knowledge, and belief is that the accountants are saying that the reasonable rate of return on such an investment is 12 to 20%. Now, if that becomes the throughput for energy, then, Mr. Speaker, sir, the cost of increase of energy product in this country will be startling. The Minister of Finance has an opportunity to wrap up, and I would hope that apart from cursing me and the leader of the opposition and the usual exercise, precisely, I would hope that he addresses the country on concerns of that nature. Because I sense, sir, that there is an inevitability of a hike consequential upon the sale and change of hands of the Terminal Company Limited from government to private sector. But there's another aspect of it, because as I understand it, there are two players in this market. We have on one hand a company called Rubis, another one a company called Sol. Now, Mr. Speaker, across this region, there are other terminals. They got them, sir. They got them in Martinique. There's a joint venture between the same two companies. In Bahamas, there's a joint venture, and Sun Oil is in it, and the same two companies. In St. Lucia, there's a joint venture. They have a company called Bakai, and the same two companies. And they have joint ownership arrangements, Mr. Speaker, sir. The reality is here, and I'm talking now serious talk about what is the nature of our market. Because while we have a Fair Trade Commission, the Fair Trade Commission's policy on these matters is that you can only go to them after you have sustained injury. You can't go before. But when injury is sustained, in some instances, it is a little bit too late. And I want the government to be thinking down the road. What is the situation vis-a-vis the fairness in allocation of product in the event that there is a shortage? When one competitor has to depend on another competitor who exclusively controls the terminal. What is the situation of fairness with respect to the avoidance of port charges when two vessels arise?
Speaker.
Yes, I remember.
Well, once again, I remember it's misleading House. I don't really want to interrupt his stride, but he did make the point that one can only go to the Fair Trading Commission in these matters when you have after you sustain injury. Let me make it abundantly clear, and that is not the case. The Fair Trading Commission is empowered to address such matters before any injury having occurred. Where the Fair Trading Commission is of the opinion that there is going to be a dominant position, is certain law allows them to intervene. In the case of the Barbados National Terminal Company Limited, the government has not yet decided on the owner or who will be the new owner of the entity. It's merely in the form of negotiation and has been stated publicly. It is subject to the approval of the Fair Trading Commission. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
And for her to say it's not the law.
Yes, I remember. Please continue. I remember you should be wrapping up, though. Your time is
I will, sir. I will. And I would not belabor that aspect of the debate, because there's yet another issue that I wanted to raise, sir.
Just
because,
1 minute.
This government, as I wrap up, I will wrap up and raise it at the same time,
Good.
sir. Because, the government invites you to speak to them on the basis of other solutions, other ways, and then when you do, they want to shut you down. And I say to the government, sir, that I look forward to the Ministry of Agriculture being given the opportunity, the wherewithal that it desperately needs to make sure that we have a final and definitive authority for the testing of proteins for export, Mr. Speaker, so that this country, which is now producing, yes, and this might be a certain private interest, cheese, and this country that is producing, Mr. Speaker, sir, milk and poultry and fish, sir, will be able to reach the European Union market and exploit the opportunities available under the Economic Partnership Agreement, where we cannot sell to Europe, Mr. Speaker, any proteins because we have not either got the necessary, we do not have the necessary, we don't have necessary definitive authority in place for the testing of the protein. And Mr. Speaker, sir, worse yet, we still do not have the legislation before the House where the Chief Medical Officer will be the final determinant. Mr. Speaker, sir,
Thank you.
I am obliged to you, sir.